So why would this happen? And so for about a year, I lived in the tension of God being present, but distant. I didn't understand what he was doing, and honestly, I just didn't like him. I just didn't like his silence. I didn't like what seemed to me to be his absence. And every time someone would come up to me and say, you know what, God is good, he's got a plan, I just wanted to punch him in the teeth. Because I'm like, that doesn't help me right now. Because I'm living in the tension of a God who I know is there, but he just feels so far away. And if you've suffered a loss like that, loss of someone that you love, you know that, don't you? That tension, how long that chapter can seem. You know, for every wedding that you go to that isn't yours yet. And you just wonder, God, what have I done that I am still single and every one of my friends is married? You know that tension, don't you? God, it's been 9 months since I've worked. Where are you at, God? What else do I have to do? That tension that we have felt before can seem like it can last an eternity. And honestly, it lasts the entire Old Testament. And the truth is that maybe we don't want to hear, or it's just hard to hear in that time, is this isn't the end of the story. Even though it feels that way, this is not the end of the story, that God is actually working something much deeper and greater than we could even possibly understand. It's happening in the story of the Bible, and it actually happens in our life. The next word in the story, if you'll open your Bibles to Matthew 1, verse 23, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Matthew 1:23. We go from thousands of years of promises and of anticipation and expectation for God to do something. And this is what happens. Matthew 1:23. Now I'm going to pause here in a second, and I want you to read the word out loud. So this is going to be like a pop quiz, but the answer's already going to be on the board. Matthew 1:23. The virgin will conceive, that's Mary, and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Does anyone want to maybe take a guess at what the third word is? Emmanuel. No, it's actually with. It's close. It was a good guess, and I appreciate you trying. Okay, with. Now the story changes. With. Thousands. Okay, we start with this identity, intimacy. That's Genesis 1 and 2. The entire Old Testament is God and us. Separation, sin has caused it. Now God comes to bridge that separation with his son, Jesus, who will be called Emmanuel, which means God with us. Now God is with us. And that changes the story, because now you can see and interact with God. You can talk with God. You can walk with God. His disciples, they walked with Jesus. They ate with Jesus. They laughed with Jesus. They cried with Jesus. And ultimately, we were able to kill Jesus. But it was him who was offering his life for us. There was a play that we couldn't even see, a plan that was much bigger than we could imagine. Because he knew that for us to be with God, he would have to come to be with us to pay a price that we couldn't pay for our own sin. Him coming to be with us changed our story. It fundamentally changed our story. That's what with does, because with means proximity. With means interaction. With means now we are together. We are together. We are with each other. When my wife and I met, we met years ago in Chicago. I grew up in San Francisco. I was in Chicago for a week, and I met her, and I fell instantly. I fell in love. Never mind the fact that I had a girlfriend that I was dating for 3 years at the time. I worked that detail out later. I was in love with this woman right here. It's another story for another time. So we started dating long distance. I was still living in California. She was living in Chicago. We dated long distance for 18 months. Anyone ever had to do the long distance relationship thing? You know, right? It's all about and. It's like we're in love and we have this relationship. We just don't get to see each other. And when we were dating, this was like before Facebook, before Twitter, before email. That's how old I am. Before email, like before affordable cell phones. I mean, we honestly had like the World War II, like someone had to crank it the whole time. Giant cancer-giving cell phones, the back in that day. So it wasn't easy for us to have a relationship. Most of our relationship was right? And then so we had to find ways to communicate with each other. So we would like write letters to each other. We use this pen and this paper. I'll show it. No, it's in the museum. I'll show it to you. It's awesome. And so we would write letters to each other. We would talk on the phone with each other. we would make mixtapes for each other. Because that's what you do when you're in love. How can I express my love to you? Well, this Journey song into this Elton John song, I think pretty much sums it up. And if you don't believe me, wait till you get to side B. It's awesome. Like, that's how we did it. That's the technology we had at the time. Now, I love her. I still love her, obviously. I loved her, and I told her that on the phone. But how different are those words when I'm looking into her eyes? How much does that change, those words, when I can say, and I can see in her eyes vulnerability. I can see in her eyes commitment. I can see that love back to me. It changes, doesn't it, when she's with me? When you're with someone. Because it's dynamic. It's a real time. And that's what happens. Jesus comes and he is with us, and we can have this time with him. Interesting thing is, he says all along, okay, look, I'm not going to stay. I'm not going to stay. I'm here with you, but I'm going as well. And his disciples didn't get it. They're like, no, Jesus, you're kind of killing our buzz here, man. No, this is going great. He's like, no, let me explain it to you over and over again in the Gospels. And that really is where this word with lives, is in the 4 Gospels. Jesus says again and again and again and again, look, I'm going. I'm not meant to stay. Because with this word with comes a limitation. It's bound by space and time. Jesus could only be in one place at one time in the Gospels while he was a human living here on earth. It was bound. So you could be with Jesus, but he could only be with these people that were right in front of him at that given moment. And Jesus said there's something far greater than with, because that's so limited. It's great, but it's still limited. I'm working on a much bigger story. Unfortunately, though, I think, my opinion is, most people who would call themselves Christians, this is about as far as their story gets. It's an amazing thing that we can have a relationship with God through Jesus. Now we can be with God. And that is a radical, life-changing, dynamic thing. The only problem is with this word with, if you can bring Jesus with you into your life and you can bring him with you into your work, and a lot of you try and do that. How do I take God with me to work? How do I take God with me into our family? How do I take God with me into my school, into my friendships? That's awesome. The only limitation with that, though, is if I can bring him with me, I can also leave him behind. Because if the limitation of with is, I can sort of bring Jesus into the parts of my life that I want him in, but when it comes to my finances, I don't really want him with me there. Because I don't want to do things his way. He's going to make me give more away than I want to. When it comes to the person that maybe you're dating right now, I don't want Jesus with me next to me on the couch. Man, I'm trying to make a move right now. Jesus, why you got to be with me right now? Do you have water to walk on or something? Like, we don't want him with me. Let's be honest. Am I right? I think for so many of us, myself included, I bring Jesus with me into the parts of my life that I want him in or need him in. But there are vast areas of my life where either I haven't invited him in or I don't want him in. That's the limitation of with. Thankfully, the story isn't ending with. The story isn't ending here. Colossians 1:27. This is one of my favorite chapters in the entire Bible. We sang about it actually a little bit ago. Colossians 1:27. If you'd open there, we're going to look at this powerful passage. Paul goes off, basically, explaining about how important Jesus is, how central Jesus is to everything. Right? So here Paul is just making this incredible case for about Colossians 1:15 all the way through 1:28. Just saying, look, you have to understand, and we sang this a little bit ago, that Christ, like, by him, all things were created. And not only by him were all things created, for him. All things were created for him, for his glory, right? So that's all happening in creation. And then Paul goes on to say, but not only that, actually all things are being held together by Christ. All things are held together. So like, this universe as you know it, seriously, is being held together by Christ. Right now, being held together. All things are being held together. Paul goes on to say, not only held together, are actually being reconciled. That opposing forces are being brought together to what is right in Jesus Christ. That's a powerful picture that Paul paints. He's trying to say, look, you have to get, if you're trying to understand the whole God thing, you have to get how important Jesus is. By him all things are created, for him all things are created, by him all things are held together, and actually through him all things are being reconciled. This is where it gets really interesting.